So with that, Mark, over to you.
Thank you, Adele. Welcome, everyone. It's wonderful to be here with you again in Sydney. As you can probably tell, the sun is shining after some rain, so the feels like the day is fresh. Welcome to everyone from the different parts of the world. It truly is a global community and global conversation we're having. So as Adele mentioned, of course, the theme of this conference is reimagining the future. And at the heart of that process is how organizations accelerate and scale innovation, how leaders play a role in that process, and of course, how as practitioners and consultants and advisors and coaches, we support that process. So it's my great pleasure to introduce Jan and Tor from Agnes Consulting, who are going to lead us into a case study that addresses that very question. So Jan and Tor are from Agnes Consulting, which is based in Hong Kong. They serve clients globally on topics of strategy, leadership, and enterprise transformation. Jan is a TLC faculty and ambassador in the Greater China region and has rich experience supporting Chinese leaders and their teams becoming more effective. Jan is from mainland China, but she studied and lived in Finland for 3 years, where she was exposed to coaching and facilitation, and that set her on the path to work in the field of organisation and leadership transformation. Tor is a former partner at McKinsey and Accenture, and since moving to China 5 years ago, has loved exploring his home country, his new home country, and is deeply grateful when his friends introduce him to places in China that are off the beaten track and not covered in any tourism literature. And I suspect, Tor, there are many, many opportunities to go to discover those. Together, Tor and Jan focus on running programmatic leadership and organisation transformations. And today they're going to share their experience on how to accelerate and scale innovation. Welcome, and I'll pass to Jan and Tor.
Well, thank you very much for that generous and warm introduction. It's great to be with you here yesterday. I enjoyed the conference yesterday tremendously. Now today, we have the opportunity to take it to another level. We've been looking forward to this event for a long time. And it's such a great community of people to connect with. So the question we will address today is, what does it take to accelerate and scale innovation in larger organizations? In this, we'll share our best insights into how to shape interventions, combining outer game work and inner game work in order to succeed in accelerating and scaling innovation. We will also dip into what kind of creative leadership competences are required for innovation and how reactive leadership gets in the way. In our remarks today, we'll be targeting two groups of listeners: organizational leaders who are interested in nurturing innovation within their own organization, and consultants and coaches who want to support their clients as they seek to accelerate innovation. This is how we will approach things. First, we'll set the context and share 5 principles to enable innovation at scale. Then we will cover 4 case studies from our recent experiences with clients in public and private sectors. And against the backdrop of these case studies, we will spend the rest of the time digging into the details of each of the 5 principles.
Wonderful, Tor. Thank you for starting our sharing. I too really look forward to being with you today. I see in the chat box some friends and colleagues that I worked with, so really feeling already part of a group, part of the community. So such a pleasure to be able to have a slot to share our experiences and some insights and also questions with you. Yeah.
We get into it again and move to the first slide.
Good.
I sit on the advisory board of 2 accelerators. One is Unleash, which sponsors entrepreneurs who are pursuing the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. The other is Antler, which is a commercial accelerator. I get to see hundreds of innovative ideas from typically young entrepreneurs every year, and I'm impressed by the creativity demonstrated by these small teams of young people. They are extremely innovative, as they are explicitly out to disrupt the market, to dethrone or at least challenge the big players. And while I don't want to take anything away from these small entrepreneurial teams, it is often innovation at scale that matters to society. It is the large organizations that have the financial muscle, the depth and breadth of technical knowledge that's required to make breakthroughs that contribute to solving our largest economic, social, and environmental challenges. To take an example, when COVID-19 struck, it was not the small biotech firms that rapidly got vaccines into phase 3 trials, but the pharma giants, the likes of Johnson & Johnson, Pfizer, AstraZeneca, GlaxoSmithKline. It's the established corporations like Huawei, Ericsson, and Nokia that are making 5G possible across the world, thereby ushering in a new era of connectivity and collaboration. It's the giants such as Apple, Samsung, and again Huawei that drive the relentless innovation in smartphones, bringing new features and functions to market at a relentless pace. And in order to accelerate the transition to a green economy, we do need the brilliant individuals in their small labs, but we also need the giants like Taka, who have the know-how and the manpower to carpet large swaths of desert with solar panels, as they've done in Abu Dhabi, or the Norwegian company Equinor, which has the deep expertise and the financial muscle to erect thousands of offshore wind turbines, thereby reducing carbon emissions in a way that really starts to matter. Next slide. But innovation is hard. In large organizations, failures outnumber successes. Some of the challenges are beautifully described in Harvard Business School Professor Clayton Christensen's book, The Innovator's Dilemma. In large organizations, the majority of free cash flow is generated by established products and services, underpinned by established ways of doing things. It takes courage and perseverance to rock the boat and challenge the established way of doing things. New ways of thinking, new ways of doing things are easily seen as a challenge to the established order, as criticism of the way of working that has generated past and current success. And this typically provides huge friction to any attempt at substantial innovation. Small tweaks may be fine, but don't challenge the status quo with too much energy is a common attitude. And as organizations grow, the internal bureaucracy takes on a life of its own. It's common for people to spend more time navigating internal politics than the time they spend actually listening to customers and other stakeholders. We're all familiar with the classical cases of incumbents such as Kodak missing out on the new big trend, in Kodak's case, digital photography, or Nokia, at one time the highest market cap company in Europe, shrinking to a shadow of its former self before selling out to Microsoft because they got too complacent, too inwardly focused, quite simply too arrogant and blinded by their own success. According to Christensen, each year 30,000 new consumer products are launched and 95% of them fail. In our work with our clients in Asia, we've seen innovation stifled by politics, by the egos of board members and senior executives, by hierarchical ways of thinking and acting, by an exaggerated focus on making the numbers this quarter. It's not surprising that most innovation at scale fails. Next slide. Many organizations wake up in time and realize that they need to be more innovative. They may launch a strategic project to boost innovation. They launch special task forces. They establish skunkworks. They establish rewards and incentives for innovation. They run ideation workshops, etc. The list is long. And this flurry of activities typically generates a surge of enthusiasm, but often there is more heat than light. After a while, things peter out, and there is little true impact from all the activity. What is often missing is due attention to the inner game. If the psychological safety is not there, people may produce lots of slides with the word innovation on them, but they will struggle to find the courage to challenge the sacred cows in the organization. They will find it difficult to have the courageous conversations that are required. They will find it hard to give candid feedback to one another. We'll find it hard to point out blind spots that are making individuals and teams victims of critical biases and therefore leading to failure in the innovation effort. Individuals and teams will easily find that while they're absolutely committed to innovation, they are more committed to not challenging certain egos, not taking any real risk, not showing vulnerability. They are effectively inoculated, and they've achieved immunity to change. We have worked with a number of clients to help them boost and accelerate innovation, addressing both of these areas, the outer game and the inner game. And some of these clients managed to get the mix right and achieve great success, and others struggle. They focus too much on the outer game interventions, or they focus too much on the inner game interventions. From a variety of cases, we've distilled 5 principles that we believe provide a robust guide to enable innovation at scale.
Thank you,
See the
Tor.
5,
This is something that I feel quite strongly about, as we've really worked with quite a couple of clients working on large-scale innovation or change programs. It is quite seldom to find this strong handshake between inner game and outer game interventions that you mentioned. What we typically see is that business run a lot of initiatives on business strategy, process improvement, or IT transformation, those so-called business areas. And separately, they run initiatives on leadership development. I believe that there's great room for both business leaders and consultants to better integrate these 2 areas. And what we are going to do is to share with you the couple of cases from which we implemented different principles. So these are the organizations that we see, to a very good degree, successfully delivered innovation by combining both outer game and inner game initiatives. We'll focus in on 4 organizations, and they're from different industries across public and private sector. We will illustrate from our experience what they did in terms of the inner game and outer game initiatives. So the first one is the largest real estate investment trust in Asia, headquartered in Hong Kong. They were having a really challenging time since last year due to political uncertainty, trade wars, social unrest, and lately, the COVID-19 pandemic. For example, the company owns over 100 malls in Hong Kong. The restaurant businesses in these malls suffered greatly due to the lockdowns, and before that, also social unrest. That reduced the company's rental income greatly, since part of the income of the landlord is actually determined by the restaurant's revenues. They collaborated with us to run innovation workshops, coach task force leaders who run innovation projects, and also update the business strategy to address the new market situations. They paid attention to both developing and executing innovative ideas, and also creating a safe and creative environment so that people are more comfortable at trying new things. That is easier said, but really hard when you see how scared people are actually about trying new things. I'll share one example of innovation from this company just to illustrate. And those from Hong Kong or have been to Hong Kong will be very familiar with this. We have many food markets where you can buy fresh produce, and they're often called wet markets. They are more popular with the older citizens. You can buy fresh poultry and seafood, which will be slaughtered for you at the time of your purchase to ensure freshness. And that's just how we want freshness to be. And these markets are lively, but also often quite dirty and chaotic, hence keeping away many potential customers who prefer the supermarkets, which are often more organized and tidier. And this REIT refurbished 40 of the markets that they own by breaking down concrete walls to create a sense of openness in the space, redesigning drainage routes so the space is dry and clean. adding other customer-friendly services such as allowing digital payments, making shopping trolleys available. As a result, they found that customers spend more time in the markets. Retailers increased sales by at least 30%, and for some of them 50 to 80%. Number of the customers increased by nearly 80%. Overall, they found that every $1 Hong Kong of investment yielded $5 of social and economic returns. That's a really encouraging example of innovation. Then to give you a sketch of the second case we'll tap into, this is Thailand's leading company in condominiums or condos. They wanted to develop senior leadership to enable regional expansion. In collaboration with us, they conducted a one-year leadership development program for the VP level that's under CEO. And then there are also these VPs direct reports, a total of 50 participants of 2 cohorts. And these leaders then formed task forces to develop and execute innovation projects. One quick example of innovation from this organization is that they created an app to better manage the communication with residents on reporting and fixing defects. That used to be a big area of causing frictions and frustration. And that helped improve the company's relationship with customers and also improve branding. That is the second organization that we'll be talking about. Then the third one, you see a ship here. This is an award-winning global cruise company headquartered in the United States with growing customer base in China. And you know how difficult this period is for them. They wanted to prepare leadership and organization to achieve substantial revenue growth to address the shock of COVID-19. In collaboration with us, they articulated vision, strategy, developed individual and collective leadership for the senior leadership team, and also worked on a number of typically so-called outer game initiatives like developing a robust performance management system, improving the IT infrastructure. One example of innovation of this organization is that they created a land-bound cruise experience because it was not possible for their customers in China to travel to Europe. That helped them continue to engage with customers when now the market is very difficult. The fourth example is also from Hong Kong. It's a world's top 50 university in Hong Kong. They focused on developing leadership and streamlining operations to enable their vision. So the attention from the very beginning was very clear, both leadership and also streamlining operations in a game and out game. In collaboration with us, they conducted deep systemic diagnosis to understand the institution's strengths, gaps, opportunities. They streamlined key operation processes such as HR, IT, procurement. They conducted a 1.5-year leadership development program for senior management team, the deans, change leaders, and also their direct reports. They designed the leadership development program to specifically support the leaders in executing innovation and change. One example of innovation is that I remember that through reviewing the recruitment process, which has great room to change and improve, the university discovered that they had hired a person to patrol and clean up the beaches during 1970s and 80s when there were many refugees from Vietnam that fled to Hong Kong. And there had been no large number of refugees coming to Hong Kong for 3 decades, but the role was kept. When the person filling the role was retiring, it was an easy decision to simply not renew and remove this role. Through hundreds of such examples of innovation, they found ways to improve efficiency while in the process also enhance leadership. Then from these and also other cases, we have extracted 5 principles that we believe really help ensure the right mix of inner game and outer game interventions to catalyze successful innovation. The first principle being structure interventions following a systemic innovation framework. The second one is conduct a deep diagnostic to uncover barriers and discover quick wins. And I think we often downplay the value of diagnostic and move into execution. And we want to talk to you a little bit about the value of a deep diagnostic. The third one is about addressing the inner game and outer game of individual development. The fourth one is about addressing the inner game and outer game of collective development. The fifth is about adopting robust program management to manage interdependencies and maximize synergy. That is especially when an organization is running multiple interventions and initiatives. And that is very often what we see large organizations do. We will cover each of these principles in our presentation using examples and share our experiences. So moving on to now the first principle. To unleash creativity and create significant value through the process, a clear shared framework is hugely valuable. Innovation is really much more than coming up with new ideas and implementing these new ideas. It is not a sequential process, but an engine, an organization where all elements need to interact simultaneously, including vision, strategy, portfolio, culture, all the elements that you see on this page. If one thing is not ready, it will just get in the way of the innovation. I'll quickly share common pitfalls and best practices for 2 of these components here. The first one is aspiration. The pitfall that we see while working with organizations is a lack of bold vision to inspire people, or that they do have an exciting vision. It is bold, but not spelled out and well cascaded to the critical levels of the organization. For example, at the first workshop with one of the 4 client organizations that we just mentioned, the team agreed that the lack of clarity of the vision, and especially the thinking behind the vision, is the #1 barrier. And they've been struggling with this for over a year. And senior leaders found that the vision to be, though very bold, exciting, but vague. They didn't understand the thinking process for arriving at the ambition. They didn't proactively either seek clarity, and the CEO also didn't somehow articulate the vision in a way that ensured clarity and alignment. The best practice that we found is that it's good to set a bold vision, explain the critical thinking behind the vision, and cascade it so that people make the vision their own by developing personal change stories. I remember that I supported the CEO developing his personal change story, sharing what he wants to achieve as the CEO, what he was prepared to do personally, and what he expected from his team in order for them to successfully achieve the vision. And I still remember the meeting we had where the CEO delivered the change story for the first time to the whole senior leadership team. And there was just such energy, and the team applauded spontaneously. Such a strong moment. They then moved on to have each of the senior leadership team members develop their own personal change story and cascade it to their own team members. That's a bit about aspiration, the pitfall, and also some of the best practices that we found really help. The second area that I want to share just a little bit about is portfolio management and idea generation. We've seen that the ideas and concepts are often very obvious or are generated too quickly without going through a process that allows divergent thinking. For example, when we had the ideation workshop with 20 participants, of the real estate company in Hong Kong, it was clear that some people were very focused on incremental ideas, while some of them are focused on blue sky ideas that were almost disconnected from reality. So the idea was either too incremental or overly grand, and that is not going to help them develop a portfolio of innovation ideas. What we did was that we used a rich set of tools to generate innovative ideas and assess the ideas rigorously to select the best ideas and increase the success rate in execution. For example, with the real estate company, we used the design thinking that many people are very familiar with to help them gain a deep, empathetic understanding of the customer's needs. And from there, generate a rich set of ideas. We then help them examine the ideas from different angles using a process called 6 thinking hats. That was an eye-opening process for them. Each thinking hat represents one way of looking at the idea. Number 1, what facts or information that they know about the idea, what benefits. The second one is the benefits that people in the team can see if this idea was successfully implemented. The third angle was what difficulties or risks they see in implementing the idea. The fourth was how they feel about the idea, how they relate to the idea. The fifth was what new ideas this particular idea triggers. So they build on each other and creating more new ideas. The last one being what processes and actions they need in order to follow up to make this really successful. So very action-oriented and process-oriented. And through such a process of examining ideas from different angles, they developed a well-balanced innovation portfolio. So that's a bit to explain the first principle about having a clear and shared framework for innovation that everyone can follow. I'll invite Tor to cover the second principle first.
Very good. The second principle is to conduct a deep diagnostic to uncover the barriers and to discover quick wins. And Yen mentioned just a few minutes ago that this is a step where we often see that change leaders go too rapidly. So they end up addressing symptoms rather than the deep root causes that are getting in the way of innovation. Without a proper diagnostic, you are effectively sailing blind. You may be putting in place techniques that worked for other organizations, or you may be implementing approaches that were successful elsewhere. But a large organization is a complex system. It's a bit naive to think that a cookie cutter approach will work. Unless you know exactly what the pain points are in this organization and can illustrate these with hard statistics and compelling anecdotes, you're really just guessing, and your chances of success are lower. Here's an overview of a diagnostic that we performed earlier this year for a client in the hospitality sector. We conducted structured interviews with a broad cross-section of leaders and employees. We immersed ourselves in the external market realities and the strategy of the company to make sure that we were crystal clear on what would truly move the needle. We performed extensive document reviews, diving into both strategic and operational documents to understand what was enabling and what was hindering innovation. We performed a battery of assessments, including the leadership circle profile for individuals and for the top team. We also performed an explicit team effectiveness assessment with the top team. We sat in on management meetings to observe culture in action. We observed listening skills in real settings. We observed the courage or lack of such as people chose to speak up in meetings or not. We observed how conflicts were managed or were typically swept under the carpet. This diagnostic took 10 weeks. At the end of that period, we ran a workshop, a 2-day workshop with the top team. By then, we had a solid fact base, and we'd already built strong alignment with management on where the pain points were and what needed to be done. The 2-day workshop deepened commitment and resolve and built strong momentum for the implementation phase. Go to the next slide and look at how we laid this intervention out then. Here's the result of the diagnostic. Yeah, go ahead, Jan.
Yeah. I personally feel very strongly about the value of diagnostic. And for me, I think what worked really for us was to make sure when we do the diagnostic, it's not consultants are doing this to the organization or the team. If we could find ways to do it with the team, and this becomes a joint discovery process and builds really deep engagement for the later execution. And for those who are interested in learning more about how to do diagnostic and the value of diagnostic, I think the book of The Practice of Adaptive Leadership has a strong chapter on this. Yeah, with that, I will move the slides for you, Tom.
Very good, thank you. So here's how we laid out the actions that were required. We did this very collaboratively, of course. I encourage you to read from right to left here, starting with the key actions required. And of course, they're articulated here at a very high level. We identified and agreed 4 key actions. And these key actions were specifically designed to address the interferences that we had identified. And you can see them up there, articulating and cascading vision, and refer to how this was a problem in this organization. Develop individuals' leadership to strengthen clarity, build a high-performing top senior team, and then put in place robust operating model that will scale. But there were underlying reasons for the low pace of innovation, and we focused more energy there. On the left-hand side, we have articulated what we came to see as the root causes. Reactive mindsets and patterns of behavior stemming from anxiety and fear, a conflict-averse team culture, and ineffective dynamics between key leaders, and the absence of key roles in the organization. The diagnostic was critical to our understanding of the root causes. And for sure here it's a joint understanding with all the top leaders. Had we skimped on the diagnostic, we would easily have been tempted to address superficial symptoms rather than the systemic issues. And creating the space and then finding the courage to talk about these issues openly was really a first for this organization. Move on.
Yeah. Here, I will talk a little bit about the 3rd principle that we found to be really valuable. I feel that this is a place where you have a bit of an intersection between diagnostic and then individual leadership development, because you could already do what I mentioned here about 360-degree assessments, such as leadership circle, to understand where individual is, where they need to go, and also use that to continue their personal learning journey. I'll very quickly just cover the circle here. This may be new to some of us. The top half of the circle includes creative competencies that lead to more effective leadership, such as being purposeful and visionary, having systems awareness, authenticity, self-awareness, and building deep relationships and collaborating well with people. The bottom half of this circle includes reactive leadership styles that will that will get in the way of effective leadership, such as wanting to comply out of fear of not being liked, protecting out of a fear of not being seen as smart, and controlling out of the fear of not getting the result one really wants. And here is one example of an aggregated profile that we did for the senior leadership team of one of the 4 organizations. Comparing their own assessment and assessment by people led by them, they realized that they're really not as creative or effective as they thought they were. Through digesting this aggregated profile together and building on their understanding of the individual profiles, they committed to addressing reactive mindsets and behaviors that were getting in their own way and working on becoming more creative. Going back to the big circle so that we can see it more clearly. And innovation really requires that individuals transcend their bottom half reactive tendencies and operate from a creative place. For example, in one of the 4 organizations, the leaders chose to comply and not challenge business targets set by the CEO that they found to be overly ambitious and unfair. And that led them to not owning the vision and targets, and led to conflicts with the CEO when they missed targets. Really painful and energy wasting process. And that is the example of complying getting in the way. And to address this challenge, these leaders will need to adjust their complying tendency and acquire skills for having difficult conversations and aligning on suitably ambitious business goals. In another organization, among the 4 organizations that we just shared with you, when we were running these innovation workshops, many leaders were afraid of showing vulnerability, admitting that they don't know how things will go, and asking for help. That made them feel very tense in these innovation workshops when they needed to experiment with new approaches and new ideas that are required for innovation. And here is an example of protecting getting in the way. They were very afraid of not being seen as smart. To address this challenge, they needed to build self-awareness and overcome their protecting tendency while learning innovation techniques. And of course, as a team, they need to also create an environment where people feel a little more comfortable at trying things. And the same principle applies to the collective interventions. At the team or collective level, it is critical to address dysfunctions in teams to build high-performing teams that have the mindsets and skills required to execute innovation. A high-performing team needs to demonstrate 5 characteristics. They need to have the presence of trust, are comfortable with conflicts and difficult conversations, have commitment to joint vision and strategy, have shared accountability and ownership, and pay good attention to results instead of being distracted by a lot of busyness with activities. One way to build these characteristics is take the team through collective leadership development workshops, such as helping the teams to learn how to deepen trust, giving and receiving feedback effectively, conducting effective performance review dialogues, and solving problems effectively, involving creativity or sometimes top-down and structured thinking. While running these workshops, it is very important to address both the mindsets and skills required. That is both the inner game and outer game. I'll share one example to see if I can highlight the slide. That's in the areas of presence of trust. One of the 4 organizations recognized that they really needed to enhance trust within the senior management team. We ran a workshop to help the team enhance trust building skills. During the workshop, individuals realized the limiting assumptions that they had about what it takes for building trusting relationships. For example, one leader believed that it was really problematic to share his personal life outside of work. And that stopped him from creating intimacy with many of his colleagues. And he became aware of that and had the courage to let go of assumption with support from a coach. He committed to building more intimate relationship with his colleagues and started to working on his listening and empathy skills, and started to also arrange things like lunch meetings with colleagues regularly. So you really see the interplay of mindset and skill both working together to support a leader build new skills and support a team build new skills. For all the 4 organizations, when we were working with them, we combined one-on-one coaching and team workshops to support them in addressing limiting assumptions and experimenting with more creative leadership skills. We paid special attention to make sure that we address both the inner game mindsets and the out game, the tools and skills, so that the learning would stick. So this bit covers the 3rd and the 4th principle where we address both the mindsets, beliefs, skills, and also tools for leadership development at both individual and collective level. Tor, I'll invite you to cover the 5th and final principle with us.
Very good. Thank you, Yen. So the 5th principle is to adopt robust program management. And this is to manage interdependencies and synergy. And that sounds very fancy, but let's double click on that and get into some of the specifics. The program management is truly critical. A bunch of disparate initiatives, loosely coordinated, are unlikely to deliver success at scale. You may achieve success locally, but it's hard to scale. The interdependencies are just too great. And the gap between performing a bunch of activities and actually achieving real sustainable value, that gap is large. So high quality program management does three things. First, it makes sure that people are doing the right thing in the right way with the right people, as far as this can be ascertained. Asking challenging questions with an open mind and involving experienced people can get you pretty far in this area. It's not about one person having all the answers. It's about scrutinizing constantly the way you're going about things and asking, are we truly now doing the right thing in the right way with the right people? It can be useful to rely on some extensive checklists that you built up through experience. The checklists are more about asking good questions than about coming with good answers. The dialogue will reveal the right answers. Secondly, program management monitors progress and impact with a beady eye, making sure that learning along the way is continuously fed back into project plans and estimates so that people are working in an optimal manner, given the best information available and the latest learning. And third, program management maintains an unrelenting focus on impact and on value realization, as opposed to simply focusing on task completion. Moving from task completion to true impact requires business acumen, courage and determination, and it rarely happens of its own accord. Together, these three aspects of program management support scaling. When they're in place, you have a good chance of moving from a bunch of good ideas to lasting large-scale benefits for the organization and its stakeholders. When these three are not in place, a competitor can pick up on the ideas and scale fast, thereby capturing the market. So in short, program management is critical to prepare for the signals that something that we've uncovered here, some idea that we've had, has real potential, and then muster the massive resources required to scale the idea. That wraps up what we wanted to share. I have been contributing a little bit in the chat along the way here. Many good questions that occurred there in the chat. And I think we have a little bit of time for a few questions. Mark, over to you to facilitate this part.
Thank you, Jan and Tor, for sharing the story of your innovation work in these companies. So it is a very complex field of consulting work, working across the system, the teams, and the individuals. So a couple of questions that stood out for me as I was watching the chat. I know we've only got a few minutes. This question from Suzanne O'Neill. I would like to hear your thoughts on how this model might be implemented in organizations following a strict agile methodology. As we all know, agile as a project approach, but also as an enterprise model is becoming extremely popular. So I think it's a great question that explores how those can be brought together. Could you give us your thoughts?
Thank you for the question. It's the question is very, very real to what I'm doing now. In collaboration with the Full Circle Group, I've been serving a pharmaceutical company that is going through agile transformation. And we went through a period where we provided strong support as leaders go about their projects and running projects in a more agile way. We provided very strong support in their leadership development. That's a lot about helping them working on the inner game. And we talk about it in a way that is in order for leaders to do agile, you need to be agile. You need to have the inner being that you feel like you don't have to control everything. You need to start to pick up habits like just, every meeting, we can't just talk about issues. We need to allocate some time for relating. So that's a lot of support on inner game. And then later we started to pick up the support on other game as well, because we started to realize that, yeah, now these leaders know what reactive and what creative is, and they started to realize that, yeah, being has a big impact on how they operate. Then they're more eager to implement a lot of the core agile practices, such as backlog to give people transparency, big picture, and also iterative approach to develop project approaches and resolve issues, and also to have retrospective. And these are practices. And to do these things really well, you need a level of being, a level of creative leadership skill to do that really well. So in this particular project, we took approach where we evolved the combination of inner game and outer game. Yeah, so that's just one of my experiences to respond to this particular question.
Wonderful. Yeah.
If I can add a little bit to that, if we have the time, Mark, I would say
Yes,
that
definitely.
when you're in a situation with a very controlling leader, it's really useful to understand the group dynamics. Because if the leader is very controlling, chances are that the subordinates are quite complying. They have learned to adapt to this. So there's a lock-in. And so you can't just work with one party or the other. If you somehow get the leader to be less controlling, the subordinates may still be somewhat fearful because there's a history, there's a legacy. So they continue to comply and ask for detailed instructions, and they defer very strongly and so on. And if you just work with the subordinates, encouraging them to challenge their leader in a productive, polite way, but show initiative and step up and so on, the leader will feel very fearful and will clamp down on this very rapidly and squash it. And it's only by working at the two levels at the same time that you can often reach a breakthrough. And bringing the two parties together and having that open conversation in a safe space about how they're locking one another in, that can be quite helpful.
Yeah, it's a great answer, isn't it, to both of you? Thank you. That sweet interface between the inner and outer game is really the most challenging thing. So I think the next question I have for you is, tell us a bit about what it takes to help an organisation be willing to embrace both of those things, because there's lots of organisations that are willing to dive into the technical approach to innovation, the outer game. Lots are willing to talk about let's do work on leadership development, let's do inner work. But the bringing of those two things together, could you share what your experience is and what it takes to take the organisation into that journey and get them to say yes?
Maybe just one quick thought from me, and see, Tor, what you have to add. From my experience, is really the key person is the senior sponsor. In many cases, the CEO. If the CEO has, naturally most CEOs will care about the business initiatives, but if the CEO also has openness to leadership development and that willingness, then you have a really strong start. If the CEO is like, oh, just what that is about, I don't see the value, it's very hard.
Yeah, thank you.
I think the approaches are different depending on where the bias is. So the bias I see more typically is people are all in favor of the hard interventions, get me the improved IT systems, do the process reengineering, improve the workflow, optimize my call center and so forth. This pink and fluffy stuff, yeah, we'll maybe do a little bit of that, but don't really understand where that fits in. If you can bring concrete cases to bear and explain how you're just really putting on band-aids, long-term, this will not be sustainable. And if you want the long-term value, you have to go deeper. In some cases it works, but it will not work in every case. And when the student is ready, the teacher will come. We can't force these things. Sometimes there's some maturation that has to happen. And in the other case, where someone is very gung-ho on doing leadership development, but it's a little bit unclear what that should lead to, they have some general hope that this will yield good things in the future, then my challenge would be that, yeah, it might, but maybe the time frame is long, and there are typically stakeholders who need to see concrete impact. And if the leadership development is in the service of something concrete, we can focus that work and we can make it more effective.
Yeah, Lovely answer. Thank you to both of you. Well, we've only got a minute left. I'm afraid if I ask a question, then I might go over time and then I'll be in trouble with, with my colleagues. So this is probably a great point to actually say thank you for a really thorough presentation. There's a lot of depth in the model that you used, the experiences that you shared. On behalf of everyone, I'm very grateful for your generous presentation. Thank you.